our Electoral Boundaries Commission public hearing in the city of Calgary. First of all, I'd like to introduce the commission. My name is Justice Dallas Miller. I'm the chairman of the commission, and to my immediate left is Susan Sampson. Susan hails from Sylvan Lake, Alberta, and is an experienced municipal politician and served a full term as mayor of Sylvan Lake. Susan volunteers in the community, and her and her husband ran a business in Sylvan Lake, and her volunteer efforts have been recognized by way of being awarded the Citizen of the Year, and she is a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. To her left is Mr. John Evans, KC. John is a lawyer with a province-wide firm known as Stringham, and he works out of the Lethbridge, Alberta office. John conducts trials throughout the province, and his legal ability has been recognized by being awarded the King's Counsel, or KC designation. John also volunteers as a member of the Alberta Judicial Nominating Committee. To my right is Dr. Julian Martin. Dr. Martin is a retired history professor from the University of Alberta. His advanced degrees are from Cambridge University. Dr. Martin has volunteered on many committees in Edmonton and now in Sherwood Park, where he resides, and he serves on provincial tribunals such as the Surface Rights Board and the Land Compensation Board. At the far end of the table is Mr. Greg Clark. Mr. Clark's an entrepreneur and a consultant focusing on information and knowledge management. Greg is, we have the benefit of his experience in that he has served one term as a member of the legislature of Alberta, representing Calgary Elbow. Greg, too, is a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal. Currently, he serves as chairman of the Balancing Pool of Alberta and consults and advises organizations relative to board governance. We are your Electoral Boundaries Commission, and if you go to the website, you can see a more fulsome description of the commissioners. A couple of things to remember. Everything is audio recorded here and will ultimately be placed on the commission website for the public to have access to. Also, everything that is said is being transcribed by the good folks at Hansard, and that transcript will also, in due course, be on the EBC website. I'd like to introduce a very important person at the front of the room, Aaron Roth. If you could just wave. He's the individual who organizes everything and keeps us keeps the trains running on time, so to speak. And if you have any written material or anything you want to leave with us, please give it to Aaron. Typically, we have 10 minutes allotted for each presenter, and that means 7 minutes per public presentation and about a 3-minute time period for exchange and conversation with the commissioners. Because of the fluidity of people coming in or people not showing up and lateness, we're flexible on the time from time to time. We are an independent body established by the legislature of Alberta, and our task is to come up with a report as required by law. The Electoral Boundaries Commission Act requires that every 8 to 10 years a commission be established to take a look at Alberta's electoral boundaries. In other words, where the 87, now this time around 89 boundaries for each electoral division should be placed. We have, in some ways, the privilege of having 2 extra ridings, so that makes our job a little bit easier. But we are must adhere to a fairly strict timeline, and the timeline is set out on the screen in front of you. We were appointed by the Speaker of the Legislature in late March of this year. So in April, we met a couple of times as a commission to go through the process and to structure the months ahead. And we started our public hearings in late May. We first met in Pincher Creek and then Lethbridge, and then last week we were in Edmonton. This week we're in Calgary and Point South, Brooks to Medicine Hat. Next week we go through Northern Alberta, and June 23rd we finish with a virtual day of hearing. After this cluster of public hearings, we then will commence deliberating as a commission and starting our work. And what does our work entail? Well, within 7 months of being appointed, we must submit an interim report to the Speaker of the Legislature as to what we think the boundaries should look like. Excuse me. The public will then have a chance to respond to that interim report, and the interim report will be circulated widely, and we will have another round of public hearings receiving feedback from what we provided in the interim report. Then finally, 12 months after our appointment, in other words, late March of 2026, we submit our final report, and the government and the legislature take steps to implement our report as they see fit. And of course, Alberta is currently divided into 87 electoral divisions, will be 89 after our round is completed, and each eligible voter in each electoral division, of course, contributes to elect one member for each constituency. To give us some historic context, the last Electoral Boundary Commission reported in 2017. They were limited to the 87 electoral divisions, so they didn't have an opportunity to add. Their population that they dealt with was slightly over 4 million Albertans. To give some context of what they did with that population with constituencies, they utilized this basic formula. They took the population of Alberta, 4,088,609 people, divided it by 87, and that figure of 46,697 is the mean average. If in a perfect world, that's the amount of people that should be in each electoral division. We don't live in a perfect world. We can't have that one person, one vote that the Americans have. So we utilize the term effective representation. Effective representation means that a target population for each electoral division is in that range, minus 25 below the mean average or plus 25 above the mean average. Our situation is quite different. As I said, we move to 89 electoral divisions, and our population is considerably higher, 4,888,723. The mean average is considerable, then almost 55,000. And the target population range then varies anywhere from low of 41,197 to 68,661. So that's the target population this commission is dealing with. Part of the challenge for us as a commission is that the incredible population growth that Alberta has experienced has not been evenly spread across the province. So we have to sort out those 89 ridings based on public hearing information and based on the population data. Our task is not create ridings that prove one person, one vote. Our task is to come up with a map that provides effective representation for Albertans across the province. Some of the factors that we must consider as part of the legislation are the relative sparsity and density of the population across the province, common community interest, which we've heard a lot about in Edmonton, and we heard some in Calgary yesterday as well, and organizations trying to keep community interest together in one electoral division. Geographic features, more so in the areas outside of Calgary and Edmonton, are a factor. And when we utilize things like geographic features, communication and transportation lines across the province, we hope to be able to create understandable and clear boundaries across the province. Finally, we are able to consider other appropriate factors pursuant to the legislation. Alberta has changed incredibly the last few years, and if you look at it in terms of the last few decades, it has it's a completely different province. And by historic context, I want to reference back in the 1970s, there was no such thing as a blended or hybrid riding. As of the late 80s, early 90s, that concept has come to be used minimally, but it also is more prominent as the electoral boundaries have evolved. So in terms of Calgary ridings, in terms of any ridings across the province, we want to hear from Albertans. Those of you who are here to present, you're not restricted to Calgary. We're happy to hear any input you have for anywhere else in the province. But of course, we're here. And the bulk of our day yesterday was taken up by submissions by Calgarians giving us information on their riding. This is the electoral map currently, setting out 87 different electoral divisions. By October, we'll have a new one proposed for 89, and by March of next year, we will have a completely new one that we submit to the legislature. Now we want to hear from you as Albertans and Calgarians. So we have a couple of presenters. I'm going to ask that Anita McDonald come forward. And as I said, generally we have a time limit. We're somewhat flexible, but please have a chair. Introduce yourself, tell us what constituency you live in, and give us your presentation.
Thank you very much. So my name is Anita McDonald, and I am from the Airdrie-Cochrane riding. So not Calgary, so I'm happy to be maybe your first from outside of Calgary. I'd like to start with good morning, members of the Boundaries Commission. Like I said, my name is Anita McDonald, and I thank you for the important work you are doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I come to you as a concerned citizen who is deeply invested in my community of Cochrane. I'm a pharmacist and an owner of a community pharmacy. Every day I serve the people of my community, not just as customers, but as neighbors. I'm also a proud member of the Rotary Club of Cochrane, a local Girl Guide leader, and an active supporter of the arts through volunteer work with local community and theater initiatives. I'm here to urge the Commission to create a distinct electoral boundary for the town of Cochrane, one that recognizes our community's unique identity, rapid growth, and clear divergence from both Calgary and the rural areas surrounding us. Cochrane is not just a satellite town. It is a self-contained and thriving community. And yet, if we are grouped into Calgary or scattered across rural ridings, we risk becoming voiceless in the legislature. We do not want to be absorbed into Calgary. We'll lose our ability to shape our future. We risk being defined solely as a bedroom community rather than a town with a distinct voice and destiny. Cochrane has its own needs. For example, we need a library. Calgary has many. Airdrie has a new one. We need a new one, and we're still waiting. We need a 24-hour urgent care center. Our population has outgrown the limited healthcare access currently available. Last year, our community faced a horrible tragedy when a family lost their 4-year-old daughter because urgent care wasn't open. If it had been open, he might still be with us today. We are lacking arts and theater facilities, forcing people to leave Cochrane to access these community-defining experiences. We need representation that understands and advocates for Cochrane's priorities. And the current boundaries for Airdrie-Cochrane, quite frankly, are failing citizens. I'll give you 2 examples. A gentleman I know lives just 10 minutes up Highway 22 from where I work and live in town. He shops in Cochrane, uses Cochrane services, sees Cochrane doctors. Yet he falls into the Banff Kananaskis riding. His life is rooted in Cochrane, but his political voice is elsewhere. Another example is parts of Airdrie fall into the Airdrie-Cochrane riding, while most of the city of Airdrie falls into the Airdrie East riding. For these Airdrie residents in the riding that I'm in Cochrane, their MLA lives in Cochrane, and a large part of the voting voice is in Cochrane, a completely different community than their own. As a result, I feel the representation is fractured, and they do not have an equal voice within their own community compared to other Airdrie residents. This is not effective representation. We need boundaries that make sense, boundaries that reflect real community lines and real service areas. Based on its population, which continues to grow at a tremendous rate, and to meet the needs of our residents and small businesses, Cochrane deserves its own riding. We need a representative who speaks for us and us alone. Thank you for listening today. I appreciate this opportunity. And again, thank the Commission for the important work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate a Cochrane voice here. We did hear from Airdrie representative yesterday, and certainly we did discuss Cochrane. So the constituency. Yeah, the map is up there. Currently, so you are in electoral division 47. What's the population there now? I can't see it.
75.
75. Okay. Okay. Well, let's start with Mr. Clark.
Thank you very much. I just want to echo Justice Miller. It's really, we appreciate you coming, and we're now pretty much halfway into these hearings, having traveled a lot of the province and a couple of days in Calgary. And what I'm struck by is the thoughtfulness and quality of the presentations we've heard. People are coming not with a particular axe to grind, but with a perspective and also some solutions and suggestions. So I just want to thank you and maybe through you to our other presenters. It's been a really great process that way so far. So I did want to pick up on one thing you said, and maybe if you could dig a little deeper. You talked about someone who's rooted in Cochrane, lives in the Banff Canada's constituency. Can you maybe just talk a little bit more about the specific geography and the communities that you feel belong together? And I'll just maybe add sort of a second layer to that question. There's no question this is far over the population. Cochrane itself doesn't quite have the population to justify a single seat. We're looking at an average target of 54,929, right? So and it looks like we will need to add some other areas around Cochrane to make that number work. Do you have any suggestions on where we might want to look for that?
So I would like to look at service area. So as a business owner in Cochrane, I can say that I have patients who come to me to my pharmacy from up Highway 22, not quite as far as Didsbury, but up near, Lachlan Road and all those beautiful ranch lands up there. We have people from Harmony who still travel into Cochrane to do much of their services versus going into the Calgary area. So I think that anyone, and we can't guarantee, like there's people in Bearspaw who will still go into Calgary. It depends on where people work and where their kids go to school. I would like to see the boundaries drawn for people who have a vested interest in Cochrane. Now, Cochrane, we are just under 40,000 as of today. We have, I think, 6 or 7 new development areas already in the works. So within another year, I'm sure we will be over that 40,000 and continue to grow. We are the fastest growing community in the country. So hitting that 54,000 with some surrounding area, I think would be definitely something that the Boundaries Commission might be able to look at.
Thank you. Dr. Martin?
My colleagues stole my comments and my questions. But again, not only were you succinct and short, for which you get points immediately, but I liked your notion of thinking about a service area as sort of a catchment that make Cochrane a magnet for people. And to follow on with the notion of what you would construe as a plausible catchment area, would you include Springbank?
I definitely see parts of Springbank, because I believe Springbank right now is in the Banff Canadaskis, right? Is it in with Canmore in that?
Yeah, everything that's not in your current writing is in Banff Canadaskis.
Yeah, right. I would see some areas of Springbank, but again, much of them use Calgary. So I have to admit I wouldn't have a strong opinion on that, maybe without a little bit more investigation.
Right.
But I believe in a service area and making that the proper representation. So if we had to take Cochrane and just kind of circle it out a bit and say, in general, these people would be utilizing those services. And I'm talking about the big services like our recreation centers, our public libraries, our urgent care centers, things like that. I think that would then give those voters, I would like when people go to the polls to think about, okay, where does my family get the things that it needs and how does my vote represent that? And I think that would be what's best for Cochrane.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice presentation. Thanks for coming. My question is this. When you are a Cochrane resident and you're looking to share or advocate for your priorities, how do you feel your representation is? Because you share a riding with also Airdrie, which is a large city and probably has similar issues. How do you feel representation is for the citizens of Cochrane?
As a citizen of Cochrane, I would say we have very different priorities than Airdrie. And so when Airdrie is a much larger, it is a large city. It has different needs, and it needs, of course, its own voice as well. I don't want to say that we're not represented, but I would say because we share also a big rural area that connects us with that small chunk of Airdrie, it gets a little overshadowed. Like as you can see, we're kind of tucked in the corner there. So even visually, we off to the side. My biggest concern, actually, I'm here to advocate for Cochrane, but it's actually the Airdrie people that I do really feel are left out of their community representation, because their vote, like I said, if you want voters to go to the polls thinking about how can I best serve my community with my vote, perhaps, those Airdrie people actually have very little say in what's happening in their Airdrie riding. If there's a whole other riding making a different vote, who maybe has different priorities, or Cochrane's voting for something that Airdrie people don't want. That's why, again, I just come back to this idea, if we can go over service areas and where people, live, work, and see their neighbors. That's mostly why I'm here.
Thank you.
Brevin?
No questions. Thank you.
Did I understand you correctly, ma'am, to say that your MLA lives in Cochrane?
Yes.
Okay. And does he or she, what's your experience as to how that person balances Airdrie's concerns in Cochrane?
Our MLA, Mr. Guthrie, was a minister up until just a short while ago. So I would say he had other priorities at the time. When it comes to his activity involvement, I would say that I'm not familiar with it. Okay. I wouldn't be able to comment.
Okay. So now looking at this map, and you answered about Springbank, and you're just under 40,000. Where would you draw the boundary for this new proposed riding? Would you just leave it as the city limits of Cochrane in that bottom left-hand corner, and then glob onto Springbank and others west and I guess west, and north? But if we took and we used Highway 766 there, do you see that? Yep. As your easternmost boundary, would that make sense?
Yes, that would make sense to me.
Okay. Okay.
And then when it comes to going west, again, I think that we also have different priorities than Banff and Canmore. Mm-hmm. Again, they have hospitals. Again, being a healthcare provider, that's kind of my number one concern for Cochrane. And so we could definitely go somewhat west, and same with, down to even Redwood Meadows, even possibly. But again, just looking at who comes into Cochrane for different things. I did mention Harmony, that new community that's on the highway there going into Calgary. Many of them still come into Cochrane versus Calgary. And definitely going more north. Like I said, I know a gentleman who lives just past that line on Highway 22.
Yeah.
And, does everything in Cochrane and,
Okay. So you and Airdrie are going to have a rate for a hospital. Yeah. Is that fair?
Well, and I would say Airdrie, again, they're almost at 80,000, I believe. Like the hospital there would serve at Cochrane. Yeah. We're just looking for 24-hour urgent care services. Like right now, we're 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So if you have a sick kid, I'm a mother of a 6-year-old, so I have to admit this story that happened last year just broke me. And if you have a sick kid at 11:30 at night, because you thought, okay, maybe I don't need to go, you're driving to the children's. Yeah. And you're trying to make that call. So, and that's the scary part for Cochrane residents. I know a number of patients that have quite acute kidney disease, and they can have some very scary episodes. And again, they're driving to the foothills at 2 a.m.
One last question. What about Bear's Paw in order to get the numbers up? Because we have some options. The good news is we have some options here. But then, of course, every boundary that's drawn has a ripple effect to the adjoining boundary. So, could you live with Bears Paw, portion of Bears Paw?
Yes, and the only reason I'm pausing is I was thinking about the comparison between Bears Paw and Springbank. And if it would be better to loop all of those people together, all of Springbank together, and then move Bears Paw somewhere else, or keep Bears Paw all together. However, again, if you're looking at service area, you might end up taking a chunk of each. Again, I wouldn't say I'm a good representative for those areas, and it'd be great to hear from them again when it comes to service area.
Okay. And we may very well hear from Bears Paw people today. And we're also tasked with naming electoral division. So Cochrane Springbank, Cochrane Bears Paw, or whatever we do will be a relatively easy name, I think, as long as we have Cochrane as the first part, right?
I would agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to jump, if you don't mind. I've got a bit of a magic map here that we can do a little bit of arithmetic on. How far north is north on 22? Like Cremona, Water Valley, that sort of about the
Let
limit?
me just think of Highway 22. I drive it a lot. Small towns. Cremona would be because I would say because we have Westbrook School up the highway there, and they are definitely users of the Cochrane area. So going a little bit further up, then Cremona would be the next small town right on Highway 22. So Carstairs and Didsbury, Sundre would still be their own riding up there. Yeah. So I'm thinking in my head as I talk.
So that'd be the extreme northern.
I would say
zone,
the extreme. Yes.
Yeah, that's the penumbra of your catchment area. Whereas further south, like the Bottrell neighborhood, would definitely be in there. That's where 22 meets 570.
Yes. And Bottrell's quite small. It has a campground and some in the area and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically, we're asking you to do our job.
Oh no, I'm happy to give as much feedback as possible. Although I will admit I am not an expert in the area. Although having grown up in another rural town in Alberta, as soon as I moved to Cochrane, I drove around to find all the little small towns, which I love to visit them when I can. So
that's incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. McDonald. This is very, this is a neat exercise. We're all enjoying this, and we learn about communities, and I think what you're suggesting fits in with the thinking of the commission. But again, everything has a ripple effect, and so we have to manage that. So thank you very much. And if you can, please stay for the rest of the presentation, and you might be able to have some input later too.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter on the list is Gurinder Brar. And in theory, we're running a little late, but not to worry. These things tend to work out. Please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Thank you very much. My name is Gurinder Brar. I'm a failed singer, failed songwriter, and an average actor. And I also happen to be the MLA for Calgary Northeast.
So there's life after entertainment.
That's correct. Well, I want to begin by expressing my deep gratitude and thank you so much for doing the work that you do. Drawing fair, effective electoral boundaries is important, not just for the current situation. It's important for the democratic future of Alberta. So thank you for doing your job with integrity and thoughtfulness. So last year, government introduced Bill 31, just the Statutes Amendment Act, and it amended Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. I would like to bring your attention towards two of those important things that deserve the attention. First is the legislation authorized the addition of 2 new electoral boundaries, which is very important for my riding in Calgary Northeast because it is already 40% higher than average population that an electoral district has in Alberta. So I would highly recommend to allocate another riding somewhere in Calgary Northeast so that people can have fair representation. And trend is mirrored same across Alberta, especially in new riding, especially new areas in Edmonton as well as South Calgary as well. So I believe that these people do deserve fair representation. And the second thing is about the Section 14 of the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. Previously, the Commission was required to consider factors such as common community interest and municipal boundary. Now it is the discretion of Commission on these matters, and this discretion is really important to look at. How it is exercised will impact the representation of communities, especially racialized communities and people from other ethnic community backgrounds. And I respectfully submit that preserving the integrity of community interests and existing municipal boundaries should remain a core guiding principle. And if I talk about Calgary Northeast, this reminds me of a small river that forgot its own name. It had been diverted so many times by engineers, by planners, rerouted to serve different purposes, that it no longer flowed through the same villages that named it, that sang songs about it, and that prayed by its banks. The river still ran, but something in it had died, which was its memory, its meaning, and its soul. And I don't want the same to happen with Calgary Northeast, because it has been cut, chopped, and rearranged so many times that people in Calgary Northeast don't feel that representation that they should. So because Calgary Northeast is more than just a geographic label, it's a different kind of community. It's living and breathing community with different cultures, places of worship, so many different kinds of foods, so many different kinds of people living from so many different kinds of ethnic backgrounds. And they have different needs. So currently my riding of Calgary Northeast is cut into two different pieces. One is the west side of the Deerfoot. And if we look at that part of the Deerfoot, it has got 70% of the population has English as their first language. Whereas on the east side of the Deerfoot, only 40% of the people has English as their first language, and 60% of the population speaks another multiple languages. If I compare two specific communities, one is Coventry and one is Redstone, they have very different demographics of population. They have very different people from different backgrounds living in those communities. So they have different interests. If I go out in Dornoch in Coventry and harvest, they ask for Green Line LRT project. But if I go on the east side, their major concern is insurance. Their major concern is new schools in those communities. Their major concern is new community center hub that is missing in that community, because Genesis Center is the only one that they rely on. So these are few of the things that must be kept in mind. So residents on the east side, as I mentioned, are connected to Genesis Center. Over 60% of the population on the east side are newcomers with complex needs. And above all, I request the all members on the commission to follow a simple rule that communities in more common should be kept intact and should be kept together. And I know that many other presenters are there and they have a lot to say, and my other colleagues have also come up and shared their opinions. Thank you for the work you do, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some of my opinions.
Thank you. Your southern neighbor presented yesterday, which was very helpful. Okay, Mr. Evans, any questions or comments?
Can you tell me more about the Genesis Center and where that's located in the riding? Because you heard about that yesterday as well. And so I'm interested to know where that sits.
So Genesis Center is just beside Nelson Mandela High School. It is close to the community of Saddle Ridge and Martindale in the riding of Calgary, Buller-McCall. If you want, I can give the address as well. It's on Falcon Ridge Boulevard. 7555 Falcon Ridge Boulevard.
And so, tell me more about the Genesis Center. What's its genesis?
So the thing is, in Genesis is a place where community comes together. It has got places where you can have community events. It hosts large variety of ethnic events. It hosts large variety of events that brings people together from different backgrounds, different languages, and different cultures. Many seniors get to sit there and they can have their own activities. We have soccer tournaments there. We have field hockey tournaments at the Genesis Center. I will be going to a soccer tournament and cricket tournaments happening there. So that center is a hub of communities in Northeast. It reflects the diversity. It reflects the real people that live there, and people are demanding, and it is operating above its capacity. It's part of YMCA, and people are demanding another community center because it's already full, and City of Calgary is already consulting communities on this matter. So that's the genesis of the Genesis.
Who operates the Genesis Center? Is it a community association? Is it the city? You said it was YMCA.
Yes, it has got YMCA, and it has got its own board.
So it's a YMCA or okay.
Yes, and just to add on to that, on the other side of the Deerfoot, west side of the Deerfoot is Vivo Center, and that attracts population more from Calgary North riding and Coventry, Harvest, and those communities, and it has got its own different board. But if you go there, look at those places, the population is very diverse. The clientele is very diverse.
Is that a YMCA?
That is not YMCA. Vivo is just their own.
Okay.
Susan?
Thank you.
Sorry, Vivo population and Genesis population is different.
Right.
Thank you for coming out, and your presentation was very good.
Thank you.
My question to you is, the population of your riding is in front of me at 85,000.
Yes.
And we're working with 55,000. So I take to heart your comment about the constant chopping and rejigging of your riding. But it's probably going to happen again because we've got to get down to 55. So knowing that, and knowing, you've got some clear geographical and transportation routes that cut it, what has to stay together to get to where we want to be?
Well, thing is that people, as I mentioned, that people on east side of the Deerfoot have very different needs. They have very diverse population, very different population as compared to people on the west side of the Deerfoot. I have seen while door knocking, I've seen while talking to people, and even the casework that we get in our office are very different on both sides of the Deerfoot. And even my office is on Coventry Hills and Country Hills and 36th Street, which I try to keep in the middle of the both sides. But still, I get very less people from one side of the Deerfoot as compared to the other side of the Deerfoot. The thing is that I believe that people who are racialized, people who have complex needs, people who are coming from different backgrounds, they have similar needs. Yes, that those needs are complex, but they're similar. So I believe even putting it with Adrie, putting it with Westmere or other parts of neighboring places will not serve the purpose. They should be kept intact.
I have one more question, but I think my colleagues will ask it, so I'll leave it if it's not asked.
Quick, because I think we're getting to this. If you look at the map and your descriptor of first language, I think is helpful. So on the west side of Deerfoot, what's the population? Do you have a rough idea? How many of the 85,000 live on the west side?
I mean, I don't have the exact number that I can point to, but during the previous election, when I looked at, there were about 17,000 electors, not just the population in Coventry Hills.
Okay.
I have the Coventry Hills.
So would the Deerfoot evenly divide the population?
If you look at the 10-year growth population, it might, yes.
Okay.
Because Cornerstone is going to be the biggest community in the Calgary. And I was talking to the developers in Cornerstone. They said that the expected population will be 40,000 there in Cornerstone. So, in Redstone, in Coventry Hills, the population that I have here is 17,000. Yes, that's the population. 17,350. In Harvest, it is about 7,000. In Livingston, in 2022, it was about 4,000, but I think it would have gone up significantly. And there are two new communities that are being constructed just close to Livingston. So that will also have population growth very soon.
So Livingston's on the west side?
Livingston is on the west side of the Deerfoot and also on the north side of the Stony.
Yeah, okay. So roughly then you're looking at what, about 30,000, you think, on that side? I kind of lost track of that.
17, 7, 24, 6, 30, plus the two new communities that are being constructed. So another 5, 7,000.
Okay, good. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Martin.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And again, as the judge said, I found your I found your analysis very helpful. I mean, I'm quite familiar with Edmonton Mill Wood, so I'm relatively familiar with some of the dynamics of serving new Canadians and their families, citizens or not. It's all on your shoulders. So if we divided it at the Deerfoot some form, you would be a bit light, but I want to ask you two things. First is about growth. I fully expect the remaining area in the northeast corner to fill out with residences. Would I be correct in that?
You are absolutely correct. And the cityscape, the community which I live in, has grown significantly, and it is still under construction. Redstone is almost developed, but there are still some parcels they are developing. Cornerstone is going to be the biggest community in Calgary, and they are expecting 40,000 people there in just that community. And we are expecting one regional park, City of Calgary Park, being constructed there.
And this is music to my ears because I ask most presenters a question along these lines about growth. One can talk about growth. City planners talk about growth and then generate plans. But what interests me on behalf of this work is what is imminent and tangible? How much Tyvek is there on new buildings? I mean, because we can project a little bit into the future for population growth with that kind of information as opposed to just the gut expectation that things will grow in a rather vague sense. So are you confident that development permits and the like have been accumulating such that you can confidently project another great building wave in the northeast corner of your riding?
Well, that's already underway. I believe that every street you walk into, there is a construction going on.
Right.
Even 2 streets from my house, there's construction going on. Cornerstone is fully under construction. They are opening new phases every few months, and people are coming in, especially the new population growth that has already came to Alberta from other provinces and have settled in those pockets of those cities, of those communities. So it is already under construction. So I'm not saying that they will get new permits in the next 5 years. I think it's already in.
Thank you. And my second question, I think, is that if we had to extend this let's play the thought experiment that this unit, what you call the east side, becomes the core of a new electoral district, and it's currently light. What about one possible solution would be to go south a few blocks? Could you stomach that?
South on the east side?
Yeah.
You mean towards Savannah and those communities?
No, going south of Country Hills Boulevard,
South of Airport Road.
South of Airport Trail.
Boulevard McCall, basically.
Yeah,
basically.
Savannah and it's a bit cheeky because I haven't asked him, but if we had to push south into what is now his riding, are those compatible communities? Because that's a key theme for you.
Yes. Savannah, again, the communities from Cornerstone, so I'll start from the up north, okay, on the east side of the Deerfoot.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, feel free to go. That's great. Just take the microphone, yeah.
Yeah, that's all. So this is Deerfoot.
Can you expand that?
Sorry, this is Deerfoot.
Yeah.
This is where Cornerstone is. Sorry, did I do something? Oh, okay. So this is Cornerstone. This is Redstone. So I want you to move it a little bit up. This is Skyview. This is more of Cornerstone again. And this is Cityscape. This is so this whole thing is Cornerstone.
That's all being developed.
Yes, everything is under construction. There will be a big park here, and this area is under construction. These, as you can see, these are all under construction. So this is the boundary for Calgary, McCall. A little bit upside, please. Yes, this is part of Savannah, and this is Saddle Ridge. These are all communities that are very diverse, and this is where about Genesis Center is.
Okay. Okay.
And this is Martindale, and this is Saddle Ridge. If we go a little bit down, up, please. And this is half of Taradale as well.
Well, I wouldn't want to. All I wanted to see was the next couple of quadrants, and they are visible, somewhat on this very map.
Yeah.
So then again, in terms of your primary concern, which is about the coherence and keeping like communities together, if we had to go further south, would we be keeping like communities together?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm not suggesting we're going to do it, but we're sensitive to the issue.
Yes.
And whether or not we are obliged to consider it, in fact, we are. All right.
Okay. Hypothetically, if we went down south, and you've got two quadrants from Boulevard McCall there, right?
Yeah.
Let's call it the northwest and the northeast.
Yep.
And assuming, and these are a lot of assumptions, which one would you prefer, the northeast or the northwest to be curved into?
So you mean this side or that side?
Yeah.
Well, either one should be fine,
okay,
because population is very similar there.
Okay.
And sorry, just one more thing to add is, if I can move map a little bit down. So the new community hub, just like Genesis Center that they are considering, will be around this place.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yes.
Good. Okay, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, thank you. I think this has been a great discussion, and my colleagues have asked most of the sort of technical questions. It feels like Deerfoot Trail feels like a very natural dividing line, and mathematically, I don't think it's any great surprise that probably lands as well. If we were to make that part of our role here is to name these constituencies. One of the written submissions, interestingly enough, said the area west of Deerfoot Trail in the north there, Nose Creek runs through it. It's an important geographic feature. How does that name land with you? Does that make sense? Do you have a better or different suggestion? And also the same question of Calgary Northeast. It is, in fact, in the northeast of Calgary. That's a pretty obvious geographic. But is there another? Do you have any opinion or preference or suggestion?
For this side of the Deerfoot, you mean?
Yeah, west. I'm interested in both sides. Yeah. Let's just say we make the boundary Deerfoot Trail.
Okay.
And we need names for both. Do you have a suggestion or preference on either side or both?
Well, I can share my suggestion. I think people do associate with this area, as you mentioned, Calgary North Creek, and even the new high school that is built in Coventry Hills has some element of the nature and of the Indigenous community's history embedded in those schools. So if you visit that school, it has got beautiful building that reflects that. So, definitely it could be Calgary North Creek or something similar to that.
What's the high school name?
So there is a high school in there.
Yeah, what's the name of the high school, though?
It is Calgary North High School.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. We already have a Calgary North School. I'm not naming it that.
So on this side of the Deerfoot, it is you can definitely call Northeast because people do associate themselves with that name, and even when they have to tell somebody where do you live, Calgary Northeast, and so that's certainly helpful. And for this place, I mean Calgary Buller McCall because that is in the memory of former MLA Manmeet Singh Buller, so that is something that should be considered as well. So yeah, I mean,
that's very, very, very helpful. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
An old friend of mine used to say there's two kinds of problems, good problems and bad problems. I think this is probably a good problem. And so thank you so much. And if you are able to stay for the rest of the presentations, please do so. Mandeep Tour, not here. Deborah Dean. We're asking you to come up early. If that's okay.
I hope this works. So, as you mentioned, my name is Deborah Dean. I'd like to say good morning and thank you for the invitation to speak to the Commission today. My constituency is Calgary Cross. Full disclosure, I have submitted a written submission because I wasn't sure that I'd be able to make it today. So I'm not going to read the full written submission. I'll be happy to know, but I'll give you the high points and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. So as you have commented this morning, I'm amazed at how quickly the city of Calgary is growing and approaching that 2 million people mark. Given that certain aspects of our day-to-day life, like education, for example, and hospitals and emergency rooms and child welfare and justice, fall under the responsibility of the provincial government, it's important to me that the attention of our MLA should not be diluted from our demographic in those areas. For example, when I pay my portion of education tax to the City of Calgary property tax, I expect to see it reflected in the Calgary Board of Education school system. It is necessary for effective representation that a Calgary Cross MLA speak for the educational success of our community's children with that first in their mind. The needs and the interests of urban and rural areas are different, and amalgamating rural and urban by not respecting municipal boundaries would be a disservice to the residents of both. I'm concerned that citizens in the City of Calgary constituencies are being underrepresented in the legislature. Equality of representation is important, and especially with the availability of modern communication options, population discrepancies based on the geographic size of riding are perhaps becoming unnecessary and undemocratic. So thank you again for the opportunity for input into the redistricting process. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer.
Quick question. Are we in Calgary Cross right now? Or are we just to the west?
We're just to the west of Calgary Cross because we've crossed over from 36th Street. But just that you could walk into Calgary Cross quite easily. Maybe not in the smoke today, but.
Thanks for welcoming us, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation. I read your written presentation as well. And one of the challenges we have, as I think we've talked about, you probably heard, the population growth in Calgary. Calgary Cross itself is a little large now, and its growth trajectory looks like it's continuing, about 11% over. Do you have suggestions on which neighborhood you feel, if you needed to carve out perhaps a piece and move it into a different constituency, where the natural boundaries are, what goes with what? Any opinion on that?
Sure, and I mentioned it a bit in my written report that when you're talking about geographic boundaries, you know, there are certain things like Deerfoot Trail, as was discussed, which, you know, are like a river. I mean, you're not going to ride your bike or walk across Deerfoot Trail. You're going to have to take a bridge. And obviously, for Calgary Cross, Stony Trail is pretty insurmountable in a lot of ways. So there are plans to extend Memorial Drive, I understand. Certainly, Deerfoot would be a limiting factor. I mean, we're not that far west right now, but it would be a limiting factor. South, we're pretty permeable going south. So, you know, we've got Memorial Drive now as part of our southern boundary, but certainly there's lots of back and forth across Memorial Drive quite easily on transit. And, you know, I mean, Calgary is a very car-centric city, but I like to think that people who are using other modes of getting around can easily do it within their riding. And on the north, you know, McKnight Boulevard is in certain areas is quite impenetrable. So those would kind of be my logical geographic boundary limit.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. I'll walk out the front door and wave at Cal. Thank you.
Dr. Martin?
Thank you, and thank you for your submission, which I read, but I wanted to ask you a question, so this is perfect. Now, this is full up. This writing is full up. Just judging from, say, a Google map and peering at the more detailed street map, there's not much opportunity. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's much opportunity here for further growth of neighborhoods. Is that correct?
I would agree with that. I mean, there isn't an overabundance of, I'm going to say, green space in the riding. I mean, we have some nice parks.
Yeah.
But certainly we wouldn't want to sacrifice any of the green space we have. And it's a pretty settled neighborhood. I mean, I'm in Marlborough Park, and I've been there for 35 years, and it was well established when I moved in there. And a lot of the neighborhoods are like that. There's some densification, quite a bit densification, I would say, happening. We've got a lot of back alley suites happening in our neighborhoods and that kind of thing. But that, you know, that can only go so far.
Yeah, and we see that all over Calgary. There's a trend there, and I don't know the city bylaws on the matter, but I think that they are becoming increasingly indulgent on this kind of thing. But there are no major development pods, as the previous speakers got lots. But you know, this is kind of a mature set of neighborhoods. And so, if I could press you further on the community of interest theme, which we had heard about. What about Monterey Park? I'm guessing that was the last sort of section to get built out back in the day.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, is it integrated, do you think, into the broader community?
I think it is, because 68th Street is again, quite permeable. I mean, we have the Trans-Canada Highway running smack dab through the middle of our riding, which you might think, well, that's a boundary, but it isn't really. I mean, we have, 36th Street, 52nd Street, 68th Street are all pedestrian friendly, and the high school is on the other side of the Trans-Canada Highway, so parallel to Monterey, but not, I mean, it's west of Monterey, it's on 52nd Street.
Right.
But, I don't think it's probably a little bit different because it is quite a bit later community, and maybe some cultural differences, and certainly the houses are a bit different there. I live in a bungalow intense neighborhood.
Right.
It's the more modern 2-story house.
I like all of those housing forms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Susan?
you. Thank you for your presentation. Do you think that there is more space without being able to look at it in detail in Monterey for development? Because I'm thinking, are you suggesting that the increase in population is mostly due to densification in the mature neighborhood?
I would say so. Now, Monterey, I've been in Monterey and I've kind of walked through Monterey, and there are some green spaces there that exist because of Stony Trail.
Right.
So I don't know that they would ever be developed, because I'm assuming
there must be setbacks.
A considerable setback for Stony Trail.
Right.
As there is for Deerfoot Trail. Right. It would be surprising to me. And then north of Monterey is Coral Springs, so it's already, that's not in our riding, but it's already a developed community.
Right, I see it now. Okay, thank you.
Devin?
Good morning. I'm wondering, is there more development? So I'm looking at Laguna Way Northeast and Catalina Boulevard and California Boulevard Northeast. Is there more development in that area? So if you're looking on the map, it would be the west side of Stony Trail.
I've walked the path there. If you're familiar with Stony Trail, it's a wonderful wetland area right from on the east side, from one end to the other. And you can sort of see on the map, there's wetlands there. So I don't think that there is a lot of room for, now, that would be a City of Calgary development decision, I guess, in conjunction with the province. Stony Trail is a provincial road, not a City of Calgary road. But I don't think there's a huge plan. I'm not aware of any planning in that area.
Are those built out? I guess is my question. I want to know if those communities have built.
Oh yeah,
out.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When you walk on that pathway, you're walking past the backyard.
So the population of this electoral district is 61,000, and which is up 11%. So what I want to know is, are we saturated now, or is there going to be continued growth in this, in these communities? Because that makes a difference in terms of how we handle what we need to do.
I think we're pretty much saturated. Again, unless there's significant densification. And I mean, there is densification, but at this point, not in the form of like high-rise towers or anything like that. So, yeah. I mean,
is there communities of interest that go across that? So is there similarities and connectivity between Rundle and Marlborough, for example?
Yes, the communities north, like Marlborough and Marlborough Park, are south of the Trans-Canada. The other ones north, Pine Ridge and Whitehorn and Rundle and Temple, and not all of those are in the riding, but they're all very, we call them the properties, and they're all pretty similar, right? I would say right up to McKnight Boulevard.
So they call them the properties. Where does that come from? What's the origin?
I think it probably had something to do with the developer.
Okay.
So, again, we're going back 40 or 50 years. I'm not 100% sure, but before my time. But they are a lot of commonality, and our rec center. I mean, people use the Genesis Center because it's huge. Ours is a little aged, but it's Village Square. It's on 52nd Street in Pine Ridge, right across the street from the high school.
Okay.
It has a public library. It has swimming pools and ice rink and all that kind of stuff. So it's people commute back and forth there on a regular basis to take advantage of that.
And so you were in which area did you live?
I'm in Marlborough Park.
Is there a community association?
Yes, there is. They're a very active community association. It's in the middle of, it's on Madigan Drive, the community association, in the middle of what is called Big Marlborough Park. Its official name is Big Marlborough Park. Okay. It has a community center, and there are actually 3 Calgary Board of Education schools, 1 junior high or 2 Calgary Board of Education and 1 Catholic board in that park. So it's a huge green space. And the city of Calgary is looking right now at doing some significant renovation in that park because it hasn't had anything done since it was basically built. And it's surrounded by there's a lot of townhouses in Marlborough Park. So it's a fairly dense community, but mostly owner-occupied townhouses, so well-maintained. Yeah.
And the name of it again, sorry, was it?
The park?
No, the
Marlborough Park is community.
The community association.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In Calgary, there's always a lot of confusion because we have Marlborough and we have Marlborough Park, and everyone assumes it's the same community, but it's actually 2 related communities next to each other.
I was confused. So thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Christine, I just want to go back and the previous Electoral Commission predicted that this riding, the population levels will likely be at or below provincial average by the time of this electoral boundaries review. You're actually about 5 or 6% above the provincial average, just as you were 8 years ago. You were 5% above. So, just like so many predictions with Alberta, the population has changed that. But my question is, why the name Calgary Cross? What's the origin of the name?
I think it's named after Sandy Cross, was he one of the big 4?
The Sandy Cross Conservation Area, does that sound right? Yeah. AE Cross was the...
AE Cross.
A municipal...
That feels like Google.
A municipal councillor? Or?
Yeah, one of the original sort of... AE Cross was one of the original... The big 4 who founded the Stampede.
Oh, okay. Calgary, so that's the history. Okay, that's helpful.
But it's... I mean, I'm going to say, I have to say, I don't think it's a significant name relative
to a better suggestion.
The neighborhood.
Yeah, okay. Well, we won't touch it if it's got some history. Yeah, one more question.
Sure. This is more of an interest question. The newest district is Monterey, and now I see it's got all California type names.
Yes.
What makes it unique? Is there architectural controls in there? Or?
It's a lot of stucco and sort of Spanish style.
It's Monterey-ish.
Monterey-ish.
Yeah, Stony. I drive by there a lot. Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that leisure center is old. on off 52nd. What is it called again?
It's Village Square Leisure.
Okay.
And
I would have called it new, but that's maybe
yeah. Well, I mean, it's well maintained and it's been renovated. But as I said, I've lived in my neighborhood for 35 years, and I was taking my kids there for summer camp 35 years ago.
Notwithstanding the odd shape, it seems to be a fairly cohesive electoral district.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, as you said, it probably doesn't need to be expanded because I think densification is probably happening faster there, and I just say because I've lived there for 35 years. There's an awful lot of basements.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a good reason for that. It's a low income area.
Mm-hmm.
And in this day and age, for low income people to be able to buy a house, and I'm talking families, they want a house with a suite so that they can make their mortgage.
Yeah.
So it's lots of, and it's fine. I mean, it's good. It's healthy for the neighborhood. There's sometimes can be a little bit of parking wars goes on, but that's life in the big city.
I'm not from Calgary, but I do have some familiarity with this. My sister-in-law lives in just off Rundle, so
okay.
Yeah, so I have some familiarity with it. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you. This is your presentation is very helpful.
Oh, well,
any last questions? No, sorry, I don't think we have a lot of time. We better move on here, but please feel free to stay because if we have time at the end, we can have maybe some more conversation.
Thank you for your time.
What time is the break scheduled? Oh, I'm way up past the break. Let's have a very, very precise 10-minute break. We'll be back at 10:35. Terrible timekeeper sometimes. So. Purdy. I'd ask that you come forward, sit at the table. Please introduce yourself and tell us what electoral division you are from.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Keith Purdy. I'm a constituent of Calgary Curry.
Okay.
This is my husband here with me. He's going to assist me with giving me points that I wish to speak to. I don't particularly want to talk about Calgary Curry in particular because I want to deal on a more broad Alberta-based scenario.
Thank you.
So I've lived in Calgary Curry for the last 35 years, and with the structure of Calgary Curry, I don't believe there is going to be any changes there. That's why I wanted to talk on a more broad-based issue here. So just bear with me. Okay. So as we look at the province of Alberta and Calgary and Edmonton in particular, it raises questions for me that the 2021 census is quite outdated at this point because of the influx of migrants and people moving to this province, mainly because of the Alberta government call to workers across the province to come to Alberta. And with the immigration status over the past few years, the population has increased quite substantially. And I feel that, you know, the data in the 21 census is quite arbitrary at this point because the influx of people has substantially changed the look of ridings and the populations in a lot of areas within the province. Calgary, Edmonton in particular, but as well Red Deer, Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, Medicine Hat. Those particular areas have increased to a point where it put the average electoral voter rate somewhat higher than what it was in the past, and in some circumstances it increases the average over the 25% margin of what the electoral districts are supposed to carry. So it kind of alters what the main issues are for those constituencies, and it changes a little bit of the parity of the vote. So if someone in an area has an expectation that the MLA will represent them in the same fashion as, you know, a more populated area in the riding, then that decreases the affectability of that particular voter to be represented properly. So it's my submission that the boundaries, if they change, and they will change, I think they should reflect a particular boundary that is very concrete and very easy to for the voters to recognize where their boundaries are and where the issues of that particular riding reflect the people that vote in that area. So if this commission is going to, for example, in Calgary, if they're going to extend the boundaries outside of, say, the city limit, then the voters that are going to be in the outer ring of the area may not have the same voice with their MLA as the people that are concentrated in the other sections of that riding. In particular, if you look at Calgary West, for example, if it extends out into Springbank and those outlying areas that are currently in a different riding, then some of those voices may not be heard the same as someone else. So it's very concerning that these people that live in the entire riding have the same voice as the other people that might be in a more concentrated and a more area that they are more active and have the opportunity to voice their opinions a little bit more strongly. In that as well, there are a couple of ridings of interest to me. Central Peace Notley and Lesser Slave Lake are substantially below the provincial average. And I think those two particular ridings need to be adjusted so that they are inclusive of at least, less than 25% below the average. As well, the statistics for those particular ridings not only are covered through the 21 census, there are also other forms of documenting people, such as I think the name has changed, but it's the Indian Affairs and Northern Development Department in the federal government, which register those Indigenous people to as opposed to the general census. So those areas that include a reserve or a Métis settlement or something like that, you need to have the information from different levels of government to get the proper accounting of the people that are in those areas. So my next heading. That points to effective representation. So it's my opinion that if the numbers aren't correct or if the numbers are skewed through different types of legislation, then the representation may or may not be there. So some ridings, particularly the rural ridings, are quite distant. The population is sparse. The representation is very hard to provide simply because of logistics in travel, in setting up, meetings or events where people can speak with their MLA, with their representative, and it's very difficult, especially in the rural ridings, that the MLA has the ability, without isolating any particular part of that area, so that equal representation is there. the constitutional right of every Albertan to have that representation and to have the access to the people that make the decision. Okay, the population, as I led to earlier, has increased substantially over the last 3 to 4 years, and you know, the current census that is in effect doesn't reflect what the migration provincially and immigration through the federal government as well. So some of the other pardon me, some of the other factors that we could look at would be the Treasury Board's report in 2025 that reflects the number and the location of people, so that this commission can have a more current representation of the people that are in Alberta and particularly in the large cities, so that there are a lot more current information that is available, because this commission, in my opinion, was formed too early for the 2027 general election. The federal general census is not scheduled till the spring of 2026. Therefore, the reflection of the voters in this province is somewhat lacking in their accuracy. So I suggest that some of these other forms of documentation be taken into consideration, so that the reflection of the voters has a little bit more concrete information. Okay. So I believe this commission should look at not only the increase in population, it should look at the interest of the particular areas. Like I led to earlier, the concerns of, say, a more urban part of the riding has different concerns, different service providers, different amenities that they access and give information as to what needs to change or things like that. So then, say, a rural part of the riding that deals with, you know, more of a municipality issues. The municipalities have a lot to do with where the money flows, where the representation lies, and the rural areas don't have that same accessibility. So it seems to me that if you take a riding and split it from a largely urban area and include a rural aspect to it, then the rural aspect is going to be eliminated from a lot of the decision making simply because of the numbers. They don't have the ability to supersede some of the large urban areas that would have the largest number of votes. And I make an example of Airdrie Cochrane. That particular area, it seems to me that it's got two larger urban centers divided by a largely rural area where the urban centers of Cochrane and Airdrie and part of Airdrie would overrule a lot of the issues that the urban or the rural areas would have in that particular instance. So some of the aspects of the boundary would make it more difficult for the particular rural people to have the validity of their vote.
Mr. Purdy, I can just interject here. I don't believe, if I recall when you came in, you were here for the introduction, and I made some comments about the time limit. So we try to keep it to about 7 minutes presentation. So I'm going to, we're a little past that now. So I'm sorry. I'll let you wind up. You wind up your very comprehensive presentation, and then we'll have some exchanges between the commission.
So finally, I've looked at all of the areas, the constituencies in the province, and the commission is expecting 2 new ridings, and I would suggest that with the increase in population and the density, that Calgary would receive 2 new ridings. Edmonton as well would receive 2 new ridings. Airdrie would stay the same at 2. Lethbridge would stay the same at 2. Medicine Hat would be incorporated as 1, and Grand Prairie would be incorporated as 1 as well. So I will conclude with that, and I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Purdy. And it's always beneficial for more global or more province-wide perspectives. And you've obviously thought deeply about this and considered the whole provincial scene very well. As to the timing of the Electoral Boundaries Commission, that train has left the station. We can't slow it down. We can't stop it. So it's kind of out of our control. But you raised a very good point, which I probably failed to explain at the introduction. You talk about the population figures we use. And let me just make reference to Section 12 of the Act, which says, for the purposes of this part, the population of Alberta is to be determined by the Commission in accordance with this section. So Section 12 has several paragraphs, and it outlines several factors. Your concerns were exactly the concerns of the Commission that we had when we were first appointed, because the Act is very clear that if we rely on the decennial census, which is every 10 years, the last one being 2021. What we learned, and you touched on it a little bit, is that notwithstanding the census is only every 5 years, I don't like the term decennial because it means 10 years, but it's actually every 5 years by Statistics Canada. It is constantly updated by Stats Canada, monthly, quarterly, and annually. In addition to that, the Alberta Treasury Board, not to be confused with Alberta Treasury Branch, Alberta Treasury Board, through its Office of Information and Statistics, quantifies and verifies and validates what Stats Canada does. So we are relying on a population cutoff as of July 2024. I'm not an economist, I'm not an actuary, I'm not a statistician, but I am told, and we are convinced as a commission, that that is the right cutoff for population, July 2024. that amount or that population level is, as you alluded to or hinted, is much more significant than the last time. It is a 4.888 million population. Now, unfortunately, there's been some news reports that have come out since recently that Alberta's population is 5 million. It may very well be 5 million, but we are relying on the most accurate data that we can find, and it's 4.88. So I hope that alleviates part of your concern about the population. So, having said that, and I hope I clarified some things, and if you referenced Section 12, it talks a little bit more about the background and what we are able to do and rely on, and that's what we're doing. So, let me open it up to the rest of the Commission for any dialogue or comments or questions. I'll start with you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you for your submissions. No questions arising. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Sampson?
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. You made an interesting point that I had been mulling over for a while, and you talked about the rural not having the best representation when they're inside a riding that has two mid-sized cities. Would you like to comment on how you think the representation is for the two mid-sized cities who share a riding? And you used the example Airdrie and Cochrane, which is fitting because we have been talking about that today.
Were you here for the person from Cochrane? Oh,
I was not.
Oh, too bad. Okay.
So I've talked to a lot of people in Cochrane, in particular, and they have their issues there. The ring around Cochrane deals with, and one of the points that I want to bring up is the gravel pit issue in and around Cochrane. Mm-hmm. And the people of Cochrane don't seem to have a voice on what the government policy is on the gravel pit issue in the surrounding areas. The gravel pit issue is very controversial for the people of Cochrane. They're going to have a lot of noise, dust, traffic, destruction, well, maybe not destruction, but changes to the environment in that area as well. So I think that having that particular area inside the boundary that envelops Cochrane and, Airdrie as well, that the policy of these pits is more a rural issue that I think the rural people should have the voice in that, and because it affects them a lot more than it would the urban area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Agree.
Thank you.
Dr.
Martin?
Oh, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Inexorably logical, I thought. But it's your initiating premises that the judge was poking his finger in about the census data. And so I hope we've given you some comfort on that, although it remains an issue. Yeah. But I found out to my horror many years ago that no census is empirical. There are always estimates and re-estimates and band-aided bits of information. What happens in the work of the Office of Statistics and Information at Treasury Board is to assess additional and alternate lines by which you could see a growth of population. Here's one. The issuance of new health cards. Kind of neat. But all of these, and there's many of these sorts of streams of data, but they're all partial in one respect. Namely, you can't have 100% reliability on them. They all have a They all have a probability percentage attached to them, but they fulfill one serious requirement, which is that you can work in all the data allows you to estimate population growth in all the electoral districts, which is one of the requirements of the Act. And so they have built a quilt of estimates of the highest probability. And we don't use the bleeding edge because there's volatility. And so you back it off a bit to find stable numbers. And that's how we arrived at July of 2024. And you alluded to the next federal 5-year census. It takes them a year to do the remedial work on their own census. And then that puts everything in a mess for the next predicted provincial election. And that's why they chose to ask us to go to work on this earlier than you might see as relevant. I actually wanted to ask about gravel pits, because if I own a farm, if I discover good gravel, I'm over the moon, because it's better than cattle. So whosoever is running these gravel pits, which are, I take it, the ones on the south flank of Cochrane, then I'm not sure how one goes about negotiating the fact they don't work at night, do this, do that. But I can't imagine that it is easily fixed in a way that would make any difference as to the boundaries of Cochrane. There's a gravel pit you can hear like a train. You can hear it 10 miles away. So I take it that it's an issue. It's always a difficult issue. But its relevant as far as an electoral district boundary line is 0, I believe. All right.
But I think in fairness, Dr. Martin, I think it was whether the MLA in the area has the ability to properly represent. I think that's what the presenter was.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
If you elect an MLA, they do take on the burden when they swear in to represent all the people.
And sorry to interject, but we are getting granular when we get down to the gravel.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It was very good. Very good. Wow, we've been at this a long time.
Okay,
yeah. I really appreciated your perspective, and we've touched on the population question. Trust me, we think a lot about this. A bit like being an economist or a weather forecaster. The only thing you know definitively is it's wrong. Yeah. And what you hope for, though, is that you're not grossly wrong, that you perhaps have predicted a direction of travel, with some degree of specificity. And I know Justice Miller likes to read out some of the predictions from the previous report as to where the population may or may not go. And I know he keeps him up at night thinking about his name on a document that predicts where Alberta's population may go. But I guess all that is to say, just maybe as a wrap up, thank you for coming. We very much appreciate your contribution, and it very much is heard and something we think a lot about up here on this table. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Purdy. And please remain for the rest of the morning. Feel free and come back after lunch to hear the presenters. Because sometimes when you have time at the end, we do engage in a more communal conversation. So you're excused to the gallery. Our next presenter is Lizette. Oh, okay, good. Lizette Tejada. Please come forward and have a seat. And normally we restrict people to 7 minutes with additional 3 minutes of exchange and conversation, but we're somewhat flexible in terms of the rest of the day. So please introduce yourself. And I am not, you're a serving MLA, is that correct?
I sure am.
Okay, please introduce yourself.
Well, and luckily, because I am an MLA, I tend to prepare and time myself. Sometimes I don't really stick to my own time, so But thank you very much. My name is Lizette Tejada. I am the current MLA for Calgary Klein. And so a lot of my remarks will focus on that riding. And I just want to thank the Commission for giving us this opportunity to participate and to contribute, and for providing so many opportunities and different ways to participate. I see that there was an online option there as well, so that is fantastic. Thank you for that. And I'm here today to share some of my thoughts on electoral representation in terms of electoral divisions and how that might impact individuals, organizations, communities, municipalities throughout the province, but of course with a special lens on Calgary Klein. So I just want to start with saying that with electoral ridings, my feeling is that they, of course, should be fair to all communities to uphold democracy. What this looks like is keeping like communities together, considering the demographic needs, which can include cultural groupings and what services they may need to access, the context of the region in which they are regularly accessed, and how individuals live, work, and commute within that riding. So for Calgary Klein itself, it's a very diverse constituency, and it's comprised of people from all walks of life. And that ranges from very urban to suburban. And we have haves and have-nots, and an array of community-serving organizations and institutions. There's the map. All right. Yeah, you can see what the span is of the riding. It's quite a large riding. So in Klein, we have active resident community associations, community organizations that serve diverse populations ranging from the disability community to other vulnerable populations as well, newcomer serving organizations, seniors' homes, cultural organizations, government services, clinics. The Peter Lougheed Hospital, of course, is a major point in the riding. Over 56 places of worship, 37 schools, post-secondary hubs, and hundreds of businesses, also included in a large industrial area within the boundaries of Calgary Klein. We also touch on a lot of the main arteries within the city of Calgary. So that's Highway 1, Highway 2, Memorial Drive, Center Street, Edmonton Trail, McKnight, John Laurie, and 14th Street. And so if anyone here is familiar with the transit lines in Calgary, those are also major touch points and crisscross across the riding. Some of them I rode going to and from high school to university. So we have all the major routes. They've changed a little bit, but are still a huge part of what we have in the riding. So some of the modes of transport also form some of the boundaries. So we have, the C-train line on the edge of 36, which you can see in the map, and just along Memorial Drive. That's not one of the boundaries, but a major artery. And so, of course, we'd hope for a green line in North Calgary, but I know that that's a discussion for another day. When I look at Calgary Klein, it's the very definition of central Calgary. And I've had the privilege of different points of my life of living here, studying here, working here in various iterations of my career. And now I'm very fortunate to serve the constituents of Calgary Klein and touch on 3 quadrants of the city. I think I might be the only riding that does that in the city of Calgary.
Do you want the 4th?
We can say
Sounds like it.
By the way, can you tell us how long you've served as an MLA?
Sure. So I have actually served in the riding of Klein since 23, so May of 23.
Okay.
So my first one.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And so in the time leading up to speaking here, I've thought a lot about how very diverse this riding is, and how it has really everything a person could touch in their lives when it comes to living in a city. And that can be, services, infrastructure, natural spaces, socioeconomic diversity, and it really is just a microcosm of Calgary as a whole. And I know that I heard one of the previous speakers talking about population growth. And so in my role as Federal Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism, of course, that has been a huge focus for me, is population growth being the largest spike in 23. And I know there's lots of changes sort of coming down the pipe from federal, but we are still dealing with the spike from 23 and trying to address the needs there. We've seen interprovincial and international immigration, as well as shifts in population, and a resurgence, I would say, from my observations, of young families looking for proximity to local schools. The needs here are distinctly urban, much like the needs of the neighboring ridings that use the similar infrastructure. Of course, Peter Lougheed Hospital is serving a larger community in Calgary. They have diverse populations. They access service through the corridors that I'd mentioned earlier. And in my time representing Klein, I've seen demographic concentrations along cultural and racialized lines, which, there is a tendency to have, especially in immigrant populations. They tend to sort of congregate. And I've seen a higher concentration of racialized residents, and this matters especially in terms of municipalities because the services and the social needs and any of the social issues that may arise really need to be looked at with that lens applied. And rural and urban needs in that context would be very different. And I know that we've seen population growth across the province. I know that there are several initiatives that target immigration into some of the less populated centers. And so those folks also have needs as a group, but they will be very, very different within that context. So the current boundaries of the riding are mostly, like I said, urban dividers, natural dividers, and this makes sense in terms of an urban riding. Some are perhaps like little jagged dividers that might take a sliver of one community or another, but in general terms, I would say like communities are together. This is especially true of the more densely populated areas in central Calgary around 16th Avenue and that sort of thing. So, like I said, I'm seeing a lot of growth in terms of new builds, not only in the established neighborhoods that are densifying, but even in some of the vast industrial area that is contained within Calgary Klein. And what I'm seeing is additions of affordable housing initiatives in those industrial areas. I know we have a Silvera that was a conversion from hotel to a resident apartment. And so we're starting to see a little bit more of that happening. That's, of course, welcome. We are in dire need of affordable housing. And I think that any of the infrastructure builds, any of the changes that happen along those lines happen, again, within that very specific context of an urban center. So, as I said before, the neighboring ridings would have similar needs, and I would imagine, like the industrial areas aren't just in my riding. I would be curious to see if some of those changes are happening there as well. But again, it is all urban, and in the context of Calgary, that is critical because that impacts the way that you access services, the conversations that are happening around infrastructure builds, and the way in which you can be represented by your MLA. And I just quickly talk about some of my experiences and some of the conversations I've had with rural stakeholders, because I'm having those conversations too, both within this role and within larger conversations around development and industry. Their needs are also very distinct, and political representation should be relevant to that context and give ease of access to their elected officials. I heard a little bit of that discussion in with the previous speaker. They are also experiencing growth, welcoming newcomers, and need representation that has like a keen understanding of that population, of the history of that constituency and how it's changing. And so when we're talking about electoral boundaries and how those get drawn, I hope that strong consideration is given to keeping like communities together, keeping in mind the context in which people live, commute, learn, and work. I would caution against boundaries that try to meld urban and rural communities, and my fear there is that the very specific and nuanced needs of those communities might not be met appropriately if that's the case. And so when this commission is looking also to add new seats, I would emphasize looking at that population growth, and I know that that's why we're here. There's been massive change even within my riding from 53,000 to 66, based on the last information I received from the Legislative Assembly. And I know that that growth is even bigger in some of the neighboring ridings. And so what I would emphasize is the importance of fair representation, that it's contextual, especially when it comes to that growth, and ensuring that that's considered. And I would suggest that there are more seats needed in some of those urban centers that have seen the biggest growth. So like South Edmonton, North Calgary, what I'm seeing all around me in my communities. And so I think that communities should be kept together, that all those demographic considerations should be centered as well, and that municipalities be kept intact. I think MLAs should be able to represent the needs of their constituents and be very familiar and never feel split in their responsibilities. And so with that, that concludes my comments on the Boundary Commission and the work that you're doing. I appreciate that work, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that that we're keeping in mind, our democracy and how well our constituents are represented.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Tejada. I wasn't texting while I was on my phone. I was using a calculator.
That's okay.
And I just want to make sure that we're speaking the same language. I'm not sure if you were here when I discussed population with the previous presenter.
Yeah.
Okay. So according to our statistic, you mentioned 66,000 that your district has. We have 60,336.
Oh, okay. It might be projected.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, I'm basing it on the information that I got around like the constituency office budget.
Okay.
And how many people were represented.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But just so you know, we're relying on the 60,336.
Okay.
And so while the previous commission said we were supposed to stay at the provincial average, you've increased you're 10% over the provincial average right now. So I just wanted to clarify that that's the number, and again, it's from July 2024. That we're unanimous in the use of that that population base. So thank you so much for your presentation. And as I've said repeatedly, it's so nice to hear from presenters that knock on the doors, that walk the streets and know the community and know the electoral division better than anyone. So much appreciated. Thanks for taking the time. I'm going to start with Mr. Evans on the end.
Sure.
Any questions or comments?
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to confirm, would you say that the growth that you've seen in your electoral district, is it new growth? Is it infills? Is it basement suites? Are we at a point of saturation? Do you see new developments happening?
I am seeing actually it runs the gamut. So we're seeing a lot of infills. We're seeing some of those basement suites. I would say probably because of the increase in rent as well. We know that the rents have gone up quite high, so I'm seeing more basement suites. I'm seeing new builds in some of those industrial areas. So those are new buildings meant to accommodate families that are low income. In some cases, I have been looking at some of the information that the city has on new developments. And so some of those are also to densify neighborhoods and to provide affordable housing. And depending on the neighborhood, there may be more or less, but I'm seeing all of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate your input. And when you started off, you talked about urban and suburban.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't believe I haven't heard that word suburban in use. Can you explain to us, what is your definition of suburban and where does that occur in Calgary Klein, and why do we need to weigh that out?
Okay. And actually, that's a good question, because I think suburban, sort of almost into the outlying areas, and I would say that occurs a little bit more at the edges of the riding, where we're going into sort of like the ridings of Calgary Beddington, and that would be, I guess, like the edges of the riding, quieter communities, more residential, perhaps less businesses, and so. Yeah, I guess it would be good to have like a formal definition. I think there's probably several, but that's what I'm thinking of when I say suburban.
And I think it's important for us, because when we're faced with electoral districts that have to be changed, we want to keep the like communities together. Mm-hmm. So a suburban versus an urban, there might not be a lot of commonality there.
Well, and I would say the commonalities there are really in the aspects of the services and the major corridors. So it really is, I guess, more, the riding is an urban riding, right? So it's not anything bordering on rural. And I would just say those edge communities are like slightly less populated. They're still seeing growth. But they're not as dense.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks.
And earlier this morning, we heard from a resident of Calgary Cross. Okay. So it's your neighbor to the east, I guess.
Right.
And so thanks for keeping these together, because it's, or having the presentations at the same session. It's helpful for us. I only have one comment. My goodness. You have every major transportation route except for Stony in your riding.
Yeah.
You even have you could even take the canoe a little bit on Bull River.
You actually can. No, it's a great riding. Right. Lots of different experiences across the riding. I do a lot of driving.
Okay. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. And thank you. You have been very helpful to me, because, and at first I was going to ask about housing forms and how people, the phenomenon of people renting basements and the like, but I think my colleague touched on that with you. But what I'm really interested in is everything that happens to the east of the Deerfoot. Now, you've said, and quite rightly, that you have to keep an eye on all the light industrial uses that are there, as well as the residential pods. And as crudely put, there are 3 residential pods within your boundary, an area that's it's going to include some affordable housing, and then 2 more established pieces. Now, we've heard a very great deal over the weeks about ambiguous relations because of urban and rural. How can an MLA, advocate for both things at once? But here we are. We've got a hybrid riding right here, and it's yours. Because you have the burden of advocating for business owners, warehouse owners, and their workers who probably don't live in your riding, but the infrastructure is in your riding, so you have to keep half an eye to it. So how do you pull that off?
Talking to a lot.
Yeah. So you spend a very great deal of time as an MLA, arranging meetings, driving to meetings, talking to people on the phone from both residential orientations and from light commercial orientations as well. So this sparks for me this interesting problem. It just hadn't occurred to me before, so thank you. That an MLA in a big urban site has to take care of the light industrial and commercial situation as well. Most of those people don't live in your riding, but all of their buildings and their work day is spent in your riding. Okay. So, it's a bit we've heard a great deal about dealing with residences and their issues and their communities, but here's a completely different scenario. And you got to juggle both, and I commend you for doing it. But I must ask, I mean, it is a somewhat different kind of set of relationships. Yeah? Okay. So I want to characterize it as hybrid, because much of what we have heard is about, well, you can't bring them in here because it's a completely different set of interests. You think, well, you know, that's kind of plausible, but maybe not when I look at your writing.
Well, and to that, I would say there is a difference in representing electors and the businesses and like you said, the industrial areas, right? You will take their areas of concern also into account when you're doing your presentation. And I would say it's such a large area that actually a lot of residents do end up using a lot of the industrial spaces and all of that infrastructure as well. But I would say in terms of representation, like I do have a lot of meetings with businesses, far more with the elected, and they are urban, right? And I would say that that's a really important distinction in the services that they access, in the issues that they bring to my attention, whether it be access to healthcare, education, the transportation needs that they have, and they will be very heavily centered on where they live.
I should sit in the corner with you, and we could tease each other on this issue.
Okay.
But, it's not just your electors; it's the full population, and it's typically there's 30% or more of people who are not elected. Absolutely. Because they're new immigrants or kids or what have you. So you're already carrying the representative burden for the full population. And so therefore that would be true for the business managers and whosoever is working on the east side of Deerfoot as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I commend you for it.
Well, thank you. And I would say, yeah, when I say electors and residents, really, like it's residents. I tend to think in those terms more than, I said elected, but definitely residents. And when we're thinking about residents, in my mind, we're talking about families, right? And wherever they may be in the riding, the needs of those families and individuals, because we have some apartments as well. Right? But yeah, residents. And
thank you.
And thank you for that. Thanks for that comment.
Great. Yeah, I was going to pick up on that thread. I mean, I think if we define hybrid too loosely, it almost takes on no meaning. But I think your answer was spot on. I don't read the notes I'm writing, but I think you caught most of it in terms of just characterizing the work that you do. I think as a member of the Legislative Assembly, representing the kids who go to school or seniors or post-secondary students or whoever it may be. So I think that was a great summary on your part. I did want to ask you a bit about the geography of Calgary Klein. We've got this big Deerfoot Trail right down the middle of it. North of 16th Avenue is primarily retail, industrial, office. It's got a bit of magic here that tells me you've got about 2,700 people who live in that part of your constituency south of the airport. And then Mayland Heights, I think, is probably the biggest residential piece east of Deerfoot. I guess I'm curious how you would characterize the sort of east and west of Deerfoot, and then also kind of the Thorncliffe and north. You talked a little bit about more getting kind of suburban up into that area. Right. But that seems to be where more of the residents are. The Deerfoot Trail, a bit of a natural break for you then on the west side more than the east side in terms of where the actual population lies of your constituency?
I don't know about a natural break, because even within, like when you look at places like Mayland Heights is a very particular community, right? It is bordering on industrial as well, and they're seeing some changes there. But there are corridors that connect Mayland, like communities like Renfrew, let's say, right? And the needs, I would say, around any of those corridors are very similar. So, and I think of what east of the Deerfoot, I think about, Mayland, but also, and along Memorial as well, so Radisson and Albert Park, right? And so I would say that the needs are similar. They might change a little bit based on like socioeconomic status, but the needs are pretty similar. The conversations that I have around development, around like accessing those larger services are the same. So I could, you know, any of the bigger corridors could be considered like a boundary, right? But I would say that through all the conversations that I've had, east and west of the Deerfoot, a lot of the concerns are similar, and it's centered more around like how densely populated places are.
So Mayland kind of heading south, then Albert Park, Radisson Heights, Southview. That's sort of a bit of a natural. Not all of that's incline, I don't think.
Albert Park and Radisson are in.
Yeah, they're in incline as well. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so that's your
Memorial actually goes through.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And as you appreciate, the numbers tell us you're 10% above the average. So we can't tell you what we're going to do with Klein, but the conversation you had with Dr. Martin reminded me of the Saskatchewan reference to the Supreme Court of Canada. And of course, that's our in a sense, the baseline for Section 3, interpretation of Section 3 of the Charter of Rights in terms of the right to vote and what is part of the mandate of this commission. Justice McLaughlin in that decision talked about the role of a member of a legislative assembly or a parliament as being representative of the people. But he also references, and it's a characterization that we've not really talked about, the role as an ombudsman or an ombudsperson. And you seem to fit in your conversation with Dr. Martin the role of a representative and an ombudsman. And so that's
take that as a compliment.
Yeah, no, and because you've got a tough job to juggle all the interests and the various people you represent, but that conversation has brought to light the role of the ombudsman. And thank you for your presentation and for coming. Very much appreciated.
And that is like a joy and an honor.
Okay, thank you.
And a long day.
Yeah, so you're excused, but please stay if you can to hear any further representations this morning. Now, I'm going to go quickly through the representative list, the presentation list. And who's that? Pranav? Okay. Okay, I'm relying on our official secretariat here. Pranav Bakaraju is present to represent or to present, so please come forward.
Morning.
Good morning.
You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Did I just get started or?
Introduce yourself, tell us what electoral division you live in, and then proceed into your presentation.
For sure. My name is Pranav Bakaraju. I live in Calgary, Calgary, Buffalo, and in downtown. But I'm here to speak about Calgary Foothills, which is where I work in the Northwest. And I guess I'll add, you just spoke with an MLA. I work as a constituency manager for the Calgary Foothills MLA.
Okay.
So kind of similar experience of, hearing what's happening on the ground, speaking with community members regularly, residents, a lot of time knocking on the doors and, going to community events. I'm not quite at the point where I'm ready to live in a suburb, so that's why I'm downtown. But that being said, I get a good sense on a daily basis as to what the needs and the issues are. As you were just talking about, we often are. The constituency office is a place where not only are we trying to represent the needs of the constituents, but also are handling complaints from businesses, residents, et cetera, beyond. So I want to thank you first for giving us the opportunity to present and speak about our experiences in these areas. It's an important, obviously, important to our democracy to have fair representation, and the riding boundaries are a big part of that. If I recall correctly, I believe the last census showed that Calgary Foothills had about 67,000 people living in the riding, So I believe it was 67,000 people in the riding, and it's expanding still. There's new neighborhoods coming in Glacier Ridge, and Esker Park, I believe, is the other one. And so generally in speaking with, friends and colleagues who live in that riding, as well as residents who I, communicate with on a daily basis, the biggest concern that I often hear from Foothills residents is that they feel that they are perceived to be at the very edge of the world in Calgary and maybe even not a part of the city sometimes. And so, one of the concerns that they have is around respecting municipal boundaries with provincial ridings, following those city limits, ensuring that when an MLA, when the constituency office is speaking with residents, that we're talking about the same services, for example, whereas it gets a little bit confusing when a riding overlaps multiple wards, multiple ridings, multiple sort of municipalities, to be able to clearly kind of share that information. So I know Alberta has a huge growing population. I believe that the Commission is planning to create 2 new ridings. I would put my perspective to say that I believe that North Calgary is one of the largest growing areas of the province, and from what I hear, South Edmonton as well. So I feel that the new ridings that are created likely should be in those areas. And the crux of my submission is that for this riding, that the municipal boundaries should be respected, and that the Calgary Foothills riding should remain within the city of Calgary. While many people believe that suburban ridings don't always have character or shared values, I have learned, even though I live downtown, in speaking with families regularly, they share that there is quite shared values and kind of unique needs of the area. This ranges from the need for schools and hospitals to sports fields and even disability services. We help people with Asian, et cetera. So one of the concerns that these residents tend to have is that if the riding on the edges of the city start being more and more diluted to areas outside of the city, that the people living in those provincial ridings might not actually be perceived to be suburban or urban. And, they point out that, of course, the people that have concern, all the concerns of all the residents in all the cities are equally valid, but the concerns of somebody who lives just outside of the city limits of Calgary, such as like Bears Paw, is very different than somebody who lives at the edge of the city. And so often the residents in the suburbs feel closer to they feel their issues are closer to someone who lives in Kensington, for example, versus somebody in Balzac or Bears Paw, depending on how ridings get sort of diluted on the edges of the city. So there are many people in Calgary Foothills that value their local community. It's something that I've actually learned eventually when I do have a family. I've realized community associations are really, really important, pillars of the community. They host events and people attend these events. And I've already learned this. If you look at the eastern edge of Calgary Foothills, it's a little tough to see them out there, but the neighborhood of Evanston is sort of split between Calgary Foothills and Calgary North. And so that community association actually has 2 MLAs, that sort of represents that entire neighborhood. And we regularly kind of run into problems, and I actually work with the Calgary North constituency office regularly to kind of say, hey, this constituent technically is in your area, not mine. And we're kind of, sharing those case files. People get confused as to who actually represents them, who they go to, so it shows that if you have boundaries that go through neighborhoods or go through certain areas, it kind of makes things extra challenging for people. It becomes complicated for the community associations themselves to work with multiple elected representatives across different jurisdictions. And when MLAs have residents under different city boundaries with different municipal services and tax systems, it's important to consider the same issue around school divisions and school boards and how that sort of affects people. So, I think the big concern is that if Foothills residents are now, if the riding gets pushed out further to the north or the west, and Foothills residents are now sharing kind of the space with people who live technically outside of the Calgary city limits, they might feel less enthusiastic about sharing their concerns around the democratic process. if we hold a town hall, like, you know, the MLA or constituency office would now need to think, okay, would people be willing to drive out 20 minutes out of the city to attend this town hall? Would they want to engage? We already have that issue. We don't have a ton of venues in Calgary Foothills, and so we often have to have events downtown or, you know, in other places, and people, you know, aren't often very willing to drive past 20 minutes, right? So, you know, and many Foothills residents are immigrants with diverse cultures, and they might be intimidated to go to a town hall or an MLA office that is outside of the city, where they feel they, you know, might not be as familiar with the area or, you know, the people that are living there. But while being immigrants, you know, many of the people in Calgary Foothills have lived in these neighborhoods for 10 plus years. They came here, you know, when the area was new. Their kids grew up here. The families grew up with the lifestyle that Northwest Calgary provides. You know, wide open fields, wide roads, and lots of wind. If anyone's been up there, you'd know. This is completely different than somebody who lives outside of a city environment and outside of city boundaries, because there is almost a rural element once you kind of go even 10 minutes out of the city. So, you know, there are aspects of Calgary Foothills that keep everyone connected and shouldn't be broken up by provincial boundaries. For example, Simons Valley United Church is a hub where Christians and Muslims regularly practice their faith in the same building. And these are residents from neighborhoods, you know, ranging from Sage Hill, Kincora, Arbor Lake. You know, having a provincial boundary divide this riding would lead to confusion where, for example, these faith communities regularly talk about local issues and have relationships with local representatives, but now in that mosque, they have to worry about and ask which MLA actually represents me and which neighborhood is actually covered. Right now, all those communities are kind of covered by the same place. And, you know, writing boundary changes are difficult for any Albertan to remember, let alone for somebody whom English is not their first language, which for a lot of, you know, immigrants in Calgary Foothills, that is the case. The census data actually shows that Calgary Foothills is one of the most diverse ridings in the entire province. Every community kind of lives in our area, so we're always engaging with the Chinese community, Muslim community, Hindus, African and Caribbean populations. They all have roots here, and you know, the same can't necessarily be said for the areas that's outside of the city of Calgary, where there might be less diversity. Many people might not have immigrated here, but rather were born there, or they live on farms and acreages, which is a very different experience. Even business owners, we were talking about the industrial space in Calgary Klein, even business owners in Calgary Foothills would have more shared values where they're lower density commercial plazas like pizza stores or car washes versus business owners who would be north of Calgary or west of Calgary that are more likely to own a ranch or a farm and have, you know, different type of sort of business needs. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to note that there are new neighborhoods like Glacier Ridge and Esther Park being built, and those residents who are going to be moving in here shortly, they will have similar expectations of a suburban lifestyle as the current residents on the edge of the city. Their experiences won't necessarily match nor be expected to be similar to those who live outside of the city boundaries. So people who live outside of the city boundaries, outside of Calgary, around Big Hill Springs Provincial Park, which is beautiful, by the way, you should check it out, you know, they likely come with a different expectation of lifestyle, different asks of their elected representative. So, you know, Foothills residents on the edge of that city, they're more likely to have common needs and expectations as people within the city of Calgary, within ridings like Edgemont or Bentonville, more than, for example, Airdrie Cochrane. So for all those reasons kind of that I've discussed, I strongly recommend that the riding of Calgary Foothills should remain within the city of Calgary. And, you know, overall, I just want to thank you for taking the time to hear out the public and my submission, and for the important work that you're doing to ensure a fair and democratic process. I think it's important to note, you know, Canadians don't want politicized processes and or gerrymandering, and the work that you're doing is critical to ensuring faith in our democracy. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And my same comments to MLA that I make to MLAs. You work in a constituency office. You really know the people, and I can imagine. And so, thank you very much for your thoughtful and experiential presentation. Just for clarification, the numbers that we have are 66 1,088. So you're about 11% above the average. So are you content with the boundaries as they are?
It's a good question. I think that the boundaries as they are, it's already too large, to your point, in comparison to other ridings. So that is something that we note when we are speaking to residents and getting out in the community. It's hard to sort of reach everybody. It's also a little bit odd. That sort of left area, the northwest area of the riding is there's a grain pit or a gravel pit, and you know, it's industry, right?
Yeah.
I don't believe we don't really have many rural residents, like very few.
Right.
Kind of empty space, which sort of works out from a representation standpoint, because then we have a small group of people, very small, who live out there. It's more like Calgary Wildlife, the University of Calgary, Hill campus, who we work with regularly, right? But the needs of the residents, it's primarily suburban residents, Sincora, Arbor Lake, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I feel that we're at the point where I think that we've kind of had a handle of the communities where we understand Sincora is a little bit different than Arbor Lake. Sage Hill being at the north edge is a little bit different than sort of Sherwood. You know, we notice these minor differences, but overall things are quite similar. I'd say the only thing that I'm especially concerned about around the boundaries is Evanston, where, you know, I regularly, at least once every 2 weeks, will have a constituent confused as to whether Evanston, you know, is part of Calgary North or not. And there's like a river on the east end that kind of separates things as well. So I know geographical boundaries kind of matter there. So overall, I mean, I think we're content with the boundaries, but the thing is, it's going to change, is my expectation, because we are, like you said, quite large compared to other boundaries, other rights.
One of the other tasks that we have as a commission is to name the electoral division. I can't think of a better name for you than Calgary Foothills. Would you agree?
Oh man, actually, funny enough, my MLA and I have good-natured disagreements about this, because I love the name Calgary Foothills because I'm a big mountains guy, and
okay.
I love the idea that I represent an area called Calgary Foothills. But I will admit there is some confusion when it comes to are we part of the federal right of Foothills, or are we is Foothills Hospital in Calgary Foothills?
Those nasty federal cousins.
They've done it to us again.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So minus those two things, I love that name.
Okay. I don't want to monopolize. The rest of the commission will have some questions, starting with Mr. Evans.
Thank you. My questions relate to the upper quadrant, because I want to know about continued growth and development in areas that are being developed. So it would be north of 144th Avenue Northwest. It looks to me like there's some developments that are happening there and in that quadrant. Is that true?
That's exactly right. Great Glacier Ridge and Esper Park, I believe, is the second one that I'm referring to. They're both just above that.
And is there any development on 144th Avenue Northwest and then Shaganappi Trail moving towards the east?
I think less so, but I'm going to have to try to recall. There's a lot of empty fields around there.
Yeah.
I don't know if the developments go quite that far, but I do know as you go down 144th and just really the edge of the city in the North Calgary at all, there's a continuation of, I don't know what the word is, sprawl, that's the word. There's a continuation of sprawl that we're seeing. People actually ask me sometimes, hey, pretty soon we're going to be part of Airdrie. Like, when are we going to meet up? That connection's there. So I can't think of it just off the top of my mind, the specific neighborhoods, but I'm confident that above 144th Street, as you go east, because this is the northwest end of the city, as you go east, there are continuous kind of boundaries. I helped out on the Calgary North campaign during the last election, and I recall even there they were talking about expected developments in the future. I just don't know the name.
So you had a 20% growth rate, and is that going to continue at that pace in your electoral district, you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, from what I hear from residents who've lived here far longer than I have, they have said that there has been continuous growth, continuous development, but that in recent years it's kind of spurred much higher. So, to go back to the original question of are we content with the boundaries? Like, we're content with the boundaries as they sort of stand today, but with the expected population change, I do think that there will be. We could be looking at a 75,000 person riding like in a few years, right? So it is something that I guess it depends on housing prices, demand, all these kinds of things, but there's no doubt that there is interprovincial migration and whatnot.
On the west end of so I'm looking at 112th Avenue Northwest up to 144th Avenue Northwest, and then west of Sarcee Trail. Looks like there's a number of gravel pits, correctional center. Are those still operational, or are those moving into being developed?
They are operational, and in fact, we've actually just met with the business owners of the gravel pit, and they have said that they're actually hoping to expand. I don't know if they're going to succeed at that, but like they're certainly operational. All of that area. I don't believe there will be, as far as I know, there are not residential developments west of Sarcee.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah, it looks like they're digging dirt.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually a really big hill. That whole gray space, it's a really big hill that you almost can't even sort of see. There's a hill, and then there's a gravel pit in the middle of that white space.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm looking at the map, and the riding is huge, but there's not a lot of people west of Sarcee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bit of a saving grace and planning for us with the growth. But assuming that Sarcee is a natural barrier right now, I guess what we would attempt to do is contemplate the population that would develop contiguously along that 144th Avenue to the north. And then once we figured out there's 4 full quarters up there, hopefully that we can plan for those numbers and get us into the next commission 8 to 10 years away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think and I was glad to hear your comments on the Evanston community. I would have a serious look at that, about taking that away. That road, Simon Valley, the way it's there, is a good cutoff with the river. When we talk about light communities, the transportation corridor likely puts it in the other right. That's what I would look at anyway. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't have thought about that if you hadn't have been here and told me that. So thank you.
Yeah, certainly, no problem. I think the main thing of that community is that, like, if I'm looking at the map here, there's sort of I want to make sure you can hear me. There's sort of like the boundary on Beddington Trail kind of turns right. There's a river in between there, and so you have a boundary of Beddington Trail like going north, but you also have another boundary of the river, and then you have this sort of arbitrary provincial boundary.
Yes.
Like there's almost so I think either way you split it, whether you move the neighborhood out of the riding or keep it in, there's going to be a bit of a challenge because of those geographical differences.
Right.
But right now we kind of have the worst case scenario because you have the geographic differences plus an arbitrary provincial boundary in the middle. So I think it's better to keep it either in the riding or take it out fully. I love the residents of Evanston, so we have no problem having it there. And to your earlier point about the general growth in the north of the riding, north of the city, I guess it kind of depends on when these developments are going to come to fruition. I guess that's what the magic thing that we don't necessarily know. But I wonder if there is something to be said around the idea of creating a riding that would be like specifically focused on all those new developments, just kind of housed into one on the northern edge. Because some of the areas like Sherwood, once you get down near Nose Hill, these are neighborhoods that have been there for a long time. Whereas as you get further north, it's more and more new, more and more recent. And from a community perspective of residents, you now have fair values of, I just moved here in the last 2 years versus I moved here in the last 10 years. For an MLA and constituency office in terms of representation, same deal where, you're speaking to one group of people who, again, have certain expectations or experiences over several years, and others who are like, we just came here, we're new, and, having all those people kind of be in one area might be helpful as well, both for that community and for the representatives.
I think one of the points you made that I have heard before and that is so important is that clear, concise, identifiable boundaries. And when our work is done and the report is out, then your work begins, because those very people you represent need to know that you still represent them or you don't, because there will be changes. And unfortunately, as we make a change to your riding with Evanston, it ripple effects down.
Sure.
And, if it was as easy as putting in an empty riding and let's fill it, I wish.
Fair enough.
I'd be done, wouldn't I? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Martin.
Thank you. And thank you. It's nice to get down to detail. I must say, every time I turn around, that Sarcee Trail is going further and further north. And it's being used in this instance as a major thoroughfare up to this new glacier development. But I would like to direct your attention south to the two neighborhoods, Citadel and Arbor Lake. Seem a little bit artificially attached to you, or maybe it's just the effect of the 201. But talk to me about why there is a community of interest.
Why there's a community of interest? What do you mean by that?
Well, because many of our presenters, and rightly so, are concerned that one, keep communities of interest when we're doing things with boundaries. And I take it that these neighborhoods to the south side of the 201 are older. They're more connected to Hawkwood and places further south, or maybe to Royal Oak, than they are to you. So if we are to do some nip and tuck work, can you give me any advice about these districts?
Sure. Yeah. I guess now that I'm looking at it visually, you're sort of implying like why don't we remove Arbor Lake and Citadel and just have the boundary go on Stony Trail? Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, and crudely put, that's what I'm inquiring after.
Fair enough. I mean, that's certainly like I think that's reasonable. I don't know whether the new developments that are coming up in the north are going to equal the populations of Arbor Lake and Citadel. Like Arbor Lake and Citadel are both quite big neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to consider. I think also I'm like slightly skewed on this because our constituency office happens to be literally at the bottom edge of Arbor Lake. Just happens to be there. And so Arbor Lake has been kind of a pillar in our community, Citadel as well. The geography in between, the highway in between definitely kind of creates that geographical boundary. But I guess the connection of the issues between Arbor Lake, Citadel, once you go a little bit more north into Sherwood, Kincora, they're quite similar, I guess, So I think that you can have certainly a good discussion as to whether you want to just remove those two and keep the riding going. But to the point made earlier, it's about the ripple effects at the end of the day. I don't know what your thoughts are around Edgemont or Beddington and the other areas that are kind of connected there. So I probably would say like that's up to the commission at the end of the day. Of course, everything's up to the commission, but it's more the concern that I'm more familiar with is the northern and western edge and making sure that that's not kind of diluted.
That's helpful. I want to turn your attention out to the northern edge, which is all farms.
Yeah.
I can't from here see how many sections, but it's a lot. And so you as a constituency manager are, in theory at least, responsible for their concern as well. That's a lot of farmland. And this came to my attention. You were talking about below Simmons Valley Road. It's just empty land. I'm going, no, that's farmland. There's a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's a lot of farmland as well as industrial in your riding. So as I put it to the former speaker, who has to juggle industrial as well as residential as part of her due diligence, so too do you. And I would remind you that without these gravel pits, Calgary would not have highways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're going to stay, I suspect.
Yeah.
And so you have to reach accommodations with them for all sorts of things. How many hours of the day and night do you operate, and all kinds of good stuff like that. But you also have all this farmland. And do you have regular contact with the farmers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you're saying that, I'm like realizing we've been very well connected with the gravel pits, very well connected with the University of Calgary and that kind of area there. In terms of the farmers, frankly, they haven't reached out to us, and we rarely get out there. Yeah, no, you're right. We rarely have a reason.
It's you to engage with them.
You're absolutely right. I would say they're very sparsely spread out for sure. And when you look at the overall population of Calgary Foothills, there at a certain point it's a logistical challenge for us, where you have 66,000, people, and let's say 800 of them are living in that farm area, right? Like whatever the exact number is, that might even be a high number for it. At the end of the day, we don't always have, our democracy often runs on volunteers. We don't always have the resources to reach the 66,000, let alone the 800 whose needs are very vastly different from those within the city. And so there's probably an argument to be made that the boundaries should actually be pushed further south to have better representation for those farmers, et cetera, who probably would have more in shared shared needs with Airdrie Cochrane or the kind of the other ridings on the edge there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just be quick. We've got the City of Calgary building permits coming up, and we've got quite a few housing units going in, over 400 in Glacier Ridge, and Sage Hill, 1,400 housing units. Like there's a lot there. So there's a couple things I noted, and I think that geographic, that river feature of Sage Hill, that's an important piece. And I guess I maybe more of a comment than a question. Part of our struggle is Foothills is already quite a bit over. And so if we're looking at the Arbor Lake, Citadel area and Stony Trail as a natural boundary without making any sort of, we're still trying to bake this cake. So we're not really trying to find new amounts of population to offset that. We're thinking of skating where the puck is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. We need to sort of balance all things out. All that said, it's a giant puzzle. My colleague, you know those plastic toys you have, like 15 squares, and there's like 6 that slide them around, try to make a picture. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Julian's analogy the other day.
It's an old world.
Yeah. There's maybe a Gen X and beyond sort of.
I think I've seen it.
I'm sure there's an app that would.
In a museum. You saw it in a museum.
Anyway, it's sort of that sort of challenge we have, right? But this, I have to say, and just echo earlier comments, really helpful to have folks who are from those communities, particularly plugged in at the MLA level, and they can sit off it. So I'll just end my time by saying thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. On that note, I realized something important that I should share is the challenge of Calgary Foothills is a lack of venues. There are not many community halls, not many places to hold events, not many places to hold town halls. It's literally availability. There's only 2 places that we generally have been able to host events, and that is the Simons Valley Church, which I mentioned is like a huge cultural hub, and the second one is the Arbor Lake Community Association. Sage Hill doesn't have a community association. Evanston doesn't have a community association. Everything else is you're on a field and at the mercy of the weather, and when it's winter, that means there's no events, right? And there is confusion when we hold an event in Dalhousie Community Association or wherever, because we can't find availability in our actual riding. And people go, I have to go outside of the riding to talk about my issues. That's probably why I feel like, for our work, Arbor Lake has been so important in being the place that everybody went to because, frankly, there just aren't many other places. That's kind of a big challenge. And that's why I think while it makes sense to kind of geographically cut off around Stoney Trail, it's not something that I really envisioned like in practice because of the need of, really that area to have some sort of public services in this riding. But thank you very much for your comments and questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And just one last question. What's the name? What's your MLA's name?
Court Ellingson. Court Ellingson.
Oh. Okay. And he's coming.
And he's
later.
coming later.
Good. Okay. Good.
Yeah, he's subbing in, and I got to sit in on a meeting for him. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks for coming. I believe that takes care of everything. Every presenter this morning. And I've blown past the 7-minute time requirement on a few occasions, but it's been most helpful. We'll adjourn the commission hearing till 1 o'clock to reconvene.